Hello and welcome to our training on client intake for an ESG rapid rehousing program. The first thing I'm going to do is log into our HMIS. I have my username and password, so I'm going to click sign in. And then after signing in, I'm going to find that I am on the home screen, so I want to navigate over here to the client's workspace. And once on the client's workspace, I'm going to go ahead and open up this menu, and I'm going to choose intake. First question I'm going to be asked is, are you adding a new client, using a current client, or do you want to select another client? So if I'm going to select another client, that means that the client has identified themselves as having records in HMIS already, and I'm going to look for those records and then select the appropriate record, and it will preload into the new intake. And then I'll go through and I'll verify the information and update any information as needed. If I were to use the current client, that would mean that the client that is currently being displayed on the dashboard, in this case it's test 3 client, would automatically be preloaded into the intake workflow. I'm going to choose to add a new client. So I click on add new client, and it's going to prompt me to search for that client. So the first thing I'm going to do is type in that client's first name. This is going to be test 4. And the last name will be client. And social. And let's say I don't have any other information than that. So I'm going to go ahead and click next. And since there were no records for test 4 client in the system, it went ahead and started the workflow. And you can see the workflow tracking up here, and basic client information is now in bold. So the first thing that we want to call attention to is this basic client information. You can pause the workflow, or you can cancel out of the workflow entirely. When you come over here, you see red star next to last name and red star next to first name. You also have it down here on date of birth quality, ethnicity, and race. Anytime you see that red star appearing in the workflow, that means it is a mandatory field and you cannot move on to the next page without completing that section. So here we have first name and last name. When creating a new client record, you want to enter the client's name in and get their full legal name if possible. Down here for name quality, we have full name reported. We'll use this whenever the full first and last name were given. And we also have partial street name or code name reported. And this is for use in any of the following circumstances: when a partial, short, or nickname was used instead of the full first name, a street name or code name was used for street outreach clients at initial intake and until the client was able to supply their full legal name, or if a name modification was used for security reasons, or for any other reason the name does not match the client's full name as it would appear on an identification. Down here we also have what I like to call the 3 musketeers, because you see them a lot and you always see them together. Client doesn't know, client refused, and data not collected. So I'm going to go ahead and switch this back to full name reported. And then we have social security number. You can enter a partial or a complete social security number. And next is date of birth. So to enter the date of birth, we just open up a calendar. 2 arrows will navigate through the years. Now let's go back to the 90s. And 1 arrow will navigate the months. And then the age is automatically pre-calculated. So if you have the full date of birth, you can enter it here. You'll enter approximate or partial date of birth. If the client cannot remember their birth year, so you can estimate the date of birth by asking the person's age and calculating the date of birth year from that. Or if a client cannot remember the month or day of birth, you can record an approximate date of January 1st. If the client cannot remember and is unable to estimate their age within 1 year of their actual age, then select client doesn't know. So we have full date of birth. I'm going to leave that there. And then next we have ethnicity. This is basically Hispanic or non-Hispanic. So we're going to go ahead and say Hispanic. The important thing to remember about ethnicity is that it is separate from race, and HUD is defining Hispanic as a person of Central American, Latin American, or South American origin. Moving on, we have race. This is multi-select. And the only thing you can't do is claim a race and then say that the client doesn't know. Okay, so HUD is defining the races as the following. For white, it is a person having origins in any of the original peoples of Europe, the Middle East, or North Africa. Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders, a person having origin in any of the indigenous peoples of Hawaii, Guam, Samoa, or other Pacific island. Black, African American, or African is a person having origins to any of the Black racial groups of Africa, including Afro-Caribbean. Asian or Asian American, a person having origins of Asian descent, including but not limited to Chinese, Indian, Japanese, Korean, Pakistani, Vietnamese, or other representative nation or region. And then we have American Indian, Alaskan Native, or Indigenous. And HUD is defining this as a person having origins to any of the indigenous peoples of North and South America, including Central America. So when we move on to gender, again, it is multi-select. You can pick as many genders as are appropriate. And we do have the Three Musketeers down here. So I'm going to go ahead and say that this is a female client. And the first thing you want to remember about gender is that this is to indicate a client's self-identification of one or more of the gender categories. Simply asking which of these genders best describes how you identify is appropriate and focuses on the person's own internal knowledge of their gender. So let's quickly take a look at the genders. We have female. These are clients who live or identify as a female. We have male, clients who live or identify as a male. A gender that is not singularly female or male, non-binary, gender fluid, agender, or culturally specific gender would be examples. These are clients who live or identify as a gender other than female, a gender other than male, a gender outside the binary, no gender, more than one gender, a culturally specific gender, or a gender that changes over time. Next, we have transgender, clients who live or identify with a transgender history, experience, or identity. If a client discloses being transgender, staff should ask if the client prefers to have the HMIS record reflect the client's transgender status. For instance, if a client identifies as a transgender male, but they do not want their transgender identity recorded in the HMIS, the staff's person would select male instead of both male and transgender. Next up is questioning. These are clients who may be unsure, may be exploring, or may not relate to or identify with a gender identity at this time. Note that client doesn't know is different than questioning. Questioning is about exploring one's gender identity. Client doesn't know should only be selected when a client does not know their gender from the 5 options available. And then we have the 3 musketeers. Client doesn't know, client refused, and data not collected. And remember, any of these first 5 can be used in conjunction with any of the others. So right down here. So next we have pregnancy status. It's a yes/no question. If you select yes, then you're going to be prompted to enter the pregnancy due date. If the client knows their due date, you can enter it here by using the calendar. If the client does not know their due date, then you can enter January 1st of the current year is what HUD will accept if the client does not know their due date. Next, we have veteran status. It's a yes/no question. Veteran status is defined as anyone who has ever been on active duty in the armed forces of the United States, regardless of discharge status or length of service. This is going to include Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, Reserves, and National Guard. A veteran is anybody with active duty begins when a military member reports to a duty station after completion of training. For Reserves and National Guard, active duty is any time spent activated or deployed either in the United States or abroad. Veteran is also anyone who was disabled in the line of duty during a period of active duty training, or anyone who was disabled from an injury incurred in the line of duty, or from an acute myocardial infarction, a cardiac arrest, or a cerebrovascular accident during a period of inactive duty training. Then we come down to contact information. If you click this box, you can hide the information. And if you unclick it, it'll appear again, and you can fill in address, city, state, zip code, email, phone numbers, work phone, message phone, any kind of safe to contact information. And you can also check these boxes if they are safe to contact. Next is family information. When you're doing an intake, you always do the head of household first. And the head of household is the primary client or the eligible individual. This is one person to whom all other household members can be linked to at the time they enter the project. In households that have adults and children, an adult must be the head of household. There must be one head of household for each enrollment, and there cannot be more than one. In a household of a single individual, that person must be identified as the head of household. Okay, so next we're going to move on to the information release. We have allow sharing and no sharing. If you choose allow sharing, everybody in your COC will be able to see the transactional records of the client. If you choose not to share, then the only thing that will be displayed is that basic client information at the very top of the client's dashboard. If you do choose not to share, DCED administrators will still have access for purposes of problem solving to those client records. I'm going to go ahead and click finish here. And we'll move on to the next page. Here we have family members. Here's where you can add a family member by checking this box. And then you would just fill in the additional information all the way across. So if I come here and I say, okay, we're going to add test pilot, last name client, and full name reported. Let's say date of birth was just a little bit ago. We'll go ahead and put in the gender and social security number, just like we did in the previous page. We're going to say daughter. And we'll hit save and close. And save and close again. Now we're up to the actual project enrollment. So we're going to go ahead and click on the drop down and say that we want to enroll them in the DCD Emergency Solutions Grant Rapid Rehousing Program. And then it's going to ask which clients do you want to enroll in this program. So we want to enroll both of them. And we'll click save. Okay, so now we're going to start with our assessments. We always do the universal data assessment first. It's going to offer if you want to default in the client's last assessment. I usually won't do that at entry. That's more for updates or exits. And it's not going to bring in the prior living situation. You will have to fill that out. So if you do default it in, you're going to want to verify all the information and supply any information that's needed. You'll see here that we have a couple of grayed out areas. These grayed out areas mean that they cannot be changed. So we have the assessment date, age at assessment, the assessor, and then disabling condition. If you go ahead and say yes for disabling condition, then when you get further into the workflow and do the barriers assessment, you will have to choose a barrier. Client location is the COC, and then we fill out the living situation, prior living situation. So I'm just going to say not meant for habitation, a week or more, but less than a month. About 2 weeks ago, and it's the first time. And then we're going to ask about the covered health insurance. We're going to say yes, we have some Medicaid. Come up here and say yes. There we go. And then I'll just hit save. Okay, so here's the barriers assessment. You can see the disabling condition is grayed out. I did say yes previously, so if I wanted to change this, I would have to go back to the universal data assessment and change it there. But I'm going to say there's some alcohol use and some drug use, and these are yeses. Okay. Condition is indefinite, yes. And then I'm going to hit save and close. Okay, we need a status for every barrier. So no, no, and save and close. Here we have a domestic violence assessment. So if they say that they are experiencing domestic violence, then you'll redirect them to a DV format. I'm just going to say no here. And then we just hit save. I come to the income from any source, yes, no. If I say yes, non-cash benefits from any source, yes. And expenses, yes. Then it's going to open up all the menus. Because I said yes to income, I have to supply some sort of income. And I also have to add a dollar amount. And you will see that it's listed down here. And the more we fill in, it auto-generates a total for us. Non-cash benefits, I do not have to add a monthly amount because they are non-cash. I can add it. And then with expenses, you can choose a group. Well, let's say it's automotive, and we have a car payment. That is $450. And then I hit save and close, and I am done with the adult. Now I'm going to do the child. This is Violet, same thing. Disabling condition, this time I'm going to say no. I'm covered by health insurance, I'm going to say yes. And let's say yes to Medicaid and yes to the CHIP program. And then I'll hit save. And disabling condition was answered as no. So I have to answer no to all of these barriers. If I just click on this box up here, it'll answer them all no for me. And then I can hit save and close. Okay, so now we've come to the you're done, all required steps have been completed page. I can go ahead and finish and close the window. And that is a completed client intake. Now, if I want to go back and edit the project entry workflow, let's say they have a housing move-in date, then I can come here and say, okay, I want to edit the project entry workflow. And I forgot to add that they had a move-in date, so I'm just going to click no changes and save and close. And I forgot to add the move-in date, so I'm going to add it now. And then this time I'm going to click on save to save the new information. And then no changes, no changes. I'll just continue to go through the workflow till I get to the end. And that's it. We're back again at the You're Done page. So I'll go ahead and click Finish. And that is it. That is the client intake for a rapid rehousing program. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to our next training.